I'm going to go over my progress this week. I have continued to make progress. I started working on chapter 7.1, section 7.1 problems, but chapter 7 is a bear. And so even though I've read it completely, I'm going to actually stop before I do any more problems. For this chapter, I did a couple, I think I got them right, but I don't feel comfortable. I'm going to actually go back and read through several of my books for all the content in chapter 7. And that will set me back probably a week. And then I probably will do 2 weeks working on chapter 7 problems. But I have to do that because I feel that this content is important. It's sort of like a content that gets done a little bit in all these books and a little bit, I guess, in a regular analysis book course, but I want to do it in depth. So that's where I'm at with the problems, and I'll show from the notebook, of course. And then as far as reading is concerned, I started reading chapter 9. Of course, I've already completed all of chapter 8, and I am in section 9.1. And chapters 8, 9, and 10 are small. And they're all kind of in the same group, vectors, some topology. And then chapter 11 is the big one. 11 and 12 are the big ones, differentiation in R to the n, and then integration in R to the n. So I'm going to build up, read 8, 9, and 10 as a group, start working on problems in 8, 9, and 10 only after I do a bunch of chapter 7 problem set work. I just need to do it. I don't want to just, okay, I read it, I did a couple of problems. That's just not enough for me. So that's where I am with the book. Of course, like I said, finished chapter 3 problems, but kind of chickened out in the last 2 sections. They're optional sections. I don't think I did either one of the one problem each that I did correctly, completely, but I'm going to come back to it later. I really want to I'm on chapter 7 mode. Then for reading, of course, as I mentioned, I am at section 9.1. So chapter 8 was actually a pretty straightforward read. And so that's pretty good. Then, of course, for the notebook, let me see if I left my mark where I stopped last time. Yeah, I stopped last time at page 225 of the problems. Yeah, I stopped right here. And so, of course, now this notebook's getting pretty full. And now I have to play with, the edge to make sure that you can see the rest of the notebook. So, yeah, I did some more problems for chapter 3. And I still feel like I want to go back to section 6.4. Some of these problems that have products that you think can be put into a factorial, I don't think that's correct. I have to revisit this type of series. So I'm going to come back to it and check whether I did it correctly or not. And then, of course, all of chapter 7 reading, which is massive. I'm not going to page through the whole thing because it would take a very long video. And it's just chapter 7 of Wade, transcribed, with some comments. Now, what I have felt like showing one of these days, and I can't think, let me see if I can find a page that's a good example. Oh, yeah, so sometimes, this is a good example. One of the 2 things that I want to talk about. So sometimes I'll see like a pattern, and I'll go back and say, okay, so you did all these theorems for series, and now you're going to do for a series of numbers, right? Which is chapter 6, and now you're going to do them for a series of functions. And so I went back and plotted all the major theorems in summary form, and then went and looked ahead in the chapter to see how they matched. Also, another thing that I do, and I don't think I've ever shown it in detail, but when I read a section, if a theorem is mentioned, and I don't know it by heart, I usually go back and write out the theorem. Not the proof, but the theorem. Let me see if I can find a good example of that in all these pages. Depending on the proof, some proofs use more theorems than others. And so, Yeah, here's a good example. So, theorems, proof. By theorem 721, second clause. Then I usually put a parenthesis and I write out the theorem. Yeah, just because I want to see the full text. And if it says by equation number 10, I'll actually write out the equation. Yeah, let me see if I find a better example that has more of that. See, yeah. Oh, and I did some ChatGPT examples for power series. Did a little detour on power. Did a lot of. I'm gonna be doing some more detours on power series. Went to Thomson Finney. Did a little power series out of Thomson Finney. Of course, with Taylor's formula, which I'm familiar with. I mean, I still remember from years of working with it back when I was in engineering. Yeah, just, yeah. So in some cases, I actually worked out some examples just to get a feel for the theorem. Of course, I like to draw out as much as I can because I'm very much a visual learning person. But yeah, I always like to go back and copy out the theorems that are mentioned in a proof. And this chapter has an interesting extra material that uses the binomial theorem. And that was very interesting. Yeah, that was definitely very interesting. Well, I guess I did page through the whole chapter, even though I didn't mean to. Just trying to look for examples when where I copied several theorems within a proof. Yeah, like here it says by Weierstrass M-test, and I go back and look for it's 715, and then I write it out, just so I can keep the flow as I read it. Then, of course, the chapter 7 problems. Yeah, I know that the first two I did right. The problem for section 7.1, chapter number 3, I kind of did it. No, it's not good enough. I gotta go back and redo this. So that's where I stopped this week.